Hi everyone, welcome to the MENAHT Belly Dance Festival. This year, this amazing festival was online. I'm so happy to be a guest with this online interview about ancient Egypt, but particularly we're gonna talk about dance and festivals. My name is Elizabeth Noreña. I live in Medellín, Colombia, and I have a master in Egyptology. That's why Isabel was very kind to invite me to be part of the festival with this conference. So today we are going to talk about the origins of dance in ancient Egypt, and we're going to talk also about the most famous festivals in the land of the pharaohs. So let's begin. Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about the historical background of the origins of dance. So we know that Egypt was the richest empire of the ancient world thanks to the Nile River. Because of this amazing river, they could have crops and they could have the food they need to survive. So that is why Egypt is called a gift of the Nile. So that is something that was fundamental in the growth of the ancient Egypt civilization. It set the rhythm of the seasons that ruled the life of whom inhabited this land. And even though Egypt was mainly a desert, it was the cradle of one of the most brilliant civilizations in history. All of this was possible, as I said before, thanks to the river Nile. The Nile gave water and crops that were needed to survive, and the river was the main waterways of transportation. People and goods, of course, and the river Nile is the longest river in the African continent, more than 6,600 kilometers. Ancient Egyptians settled in the last 1,300 kilometers of the river flow, where it was possible to sail, and Egypt just had a fertile soil in the valley area that was called the Upper Egypt. At the beginning of Egypt's history, the empire was not unified. We had the Upper Egypt and the Lower Egypt. Okay, it was the pharaoh called Menes or Narmer who unified the empire. So the fertile soil in the valley area was in the Upper Egypt, and the delta, the Lower Egypt, was the other fertile soil. It was called the Black Land. It is important to remember this name that I'm going to tell you, Kemet, because the ancient Egyptians didn't call their country Egypt as we do nowadays. They used to call their land Kemet because it means the black land. And why black? Black was not a bad color for them. Black was a positive color because black was the color of that part of the river Nile water that was possible the area to cultivate. So that's why they love that color, because they connected the black color to fertility, prosperity, and abundance. So the good land of Egypt was called Kemet, and the desert area where there was not possible to have crops was called the Red Land, and they call it Deshret. Deshret, the Red Land, and Kemet, the Black Land. And they call it the Red Land because of the color of the sands of the desert. Here I'm going to show you this slide in Spanish as well, because I know that in these conferences, we have people from all over the world. So that's why we are giving this in English, but also we have the Spanish subtitles, so everyone could feel welcome to the conference. Now, let's get into the matter that we are called today, that is origins of dance in ancient Egypt. These are the three most important divisions of periods of time in the Egyptian history: the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. So, in the Old Kingdom, we found a mastaba of a noble character that was called Mereduka. He belonged to the 6th dynasty, and this tomb was built in Saqqara, and it shows a great devotion of dance. It is important to remark that the findings that we have to really understand the role of dance and music in ancient Egypt was mostly because of the murals, the low reliefs that we found, descriptions as well in the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, or the Valley of the Nobles, or the Valley of the Queens. In this case, we are talking about a tomb in Saqqara, and it shows a great devotion for dance. Many of the walls decoration have dancers. In the Chamber of Music and Dance, you will find stills with drawn scenes about men and women dancing. And on the lower part of the mural, you will find men clapping and for groups of women gathered together dancing. On the upper part, 6 women are clapping while 8 other women are dancing, lifting their arms. So that's one of the most important representations in the Old Kingdom about dance in ancient Egypt. In the main chamber, several women are dancing with mirrors, holding symbols that were connected with the goddess Hathor, that we'll see later on why Hathor is so important in the dance world of ancient Egypt. In the same area, there is a section reserved to his wife, the wife of the noble Mereduka, a relief where women appear in groups of 2. One of them is waving and the other clapping, and the male dancers are the way they portray the male dancers are in a very calm and symmetrical way. The women, the female dancers, are the ones who are shown in these murals with movements and instruments and mirrors, and the men are more calmer. The Middle Kingdom, during the 11th and the 12th dynasties, little funerary statues were made. They represented the daily lives of ancient Egyptians: servants, sailors, dancers, musicians, soldiers, and artisans. The nobles and the kings used to decorate their tombs with murals of different dance representations. So, as far as we can see, Old Kingdom and Middle Kingdom stick like to the same way they used to represent dance in the murals of their tombs. Now, the New Kingdom. There is a temple of the god Amun in Karnak that was one of the most important gods in ancient Egypt. He was famous first in one of the capitals that Egypt used to have, that was Thebes. Thebes and Memphis were the 2 capitals that during the history, throughout the history of ancient Egypt, we can find. And Amun was really famous in Thebes. So the Temple of Amun in Karnak is a block of granite that was found with reliefs from Hatshepsut's reign. Hatshepsut was the only woman in that New Kingdom that was crowned as a pharaoh herself, not just a queen, but a pharaoh. And she belonged to the 18th dynasty. And in this temple of Amun in Karnak, you can see musicians with tambourines and dancers doing contortions. In the Valley of the Nobles were found many tombs with beautiful murals in which dance is the main character. The tomb of Nak That is the tomb that you will find in most of the references, books, documentaries, because Nag, who was a scribe, also a priest, the chief of the barns and the chief of the vineyards of the king. He had different titles. He was a very important character in the New Kingdom. And his tomb is really, really a masterpiece. So he used to be during the Tutmosis IV reign in the 18th dynasty. And in his tomb, you are able to see the contrast of the dancers' movement with the musicians. From that same time is the tomb of Horemheb, the pharaoh from the 18th dynasty as well, skin or color dancers. Here is the same slide. It's in Spanish for the Spanish speakers of the audience. Now, the importance of dance. Music, dancing, and singing had great importance in ancient Egypt because they were the arts that connected people to their gods. Remember that the people in ancient Egypt, they communicated with their gods through the pharaoh, because the pharaoh was like the person that was the embodiment of divinity in the land. So music and dance were the arts that connected people to their gods. Singers, musicians, and dancers were considered professionals in the temples. It means that they have a really important role. Dancing was also associated with banquets, feasts, and popular festivals. The evidence of these celebrations were found in tombs. As I mentioned before, tombs are like the key for us, for Egyptologists, for the evidence about dance and music in ancient Egypt. In Luxor and Saqqara, we can see tombs decorated with feasts from the afterlife, where the deceased appears enjoying with his loved ones, surrounded by dancers, musicians, lots of food, incense, and celebrating life and afterlife. Remember that for them, the passing to the afterlife was not something painful or bad. It was a celebration, because it means that if there is an afterlife, they are immortal. They believe in immortality. That's why they preserve the body through the process of embalming and mummification. So after the soul of the deceased can pass the judgment of the soul in the underworld with the god Osiris. The underworld was called the Duat. So the body and the soul can be reunited again, and they can live forever in a place that were called the Aru fields. Okay, so that's why it's important that we point out that when we find these kind of celebrations in the tombs decoration, is because for them, death was only the beginning of something that was much more important. Here is the same slide in Spanish. Now, the connection of the dance and the divine. Dance had a sacred nature because of its connection to the divine. As I mentioned before, dancing, singing were arts that connected people with their gods, and they were also linked to the official celebration, the religious celebrations. So they danced to celebrate religious aspects that were related to the monarchy, because the pharaohs and queens were considered gods among people. Hathor was the main goddess associated with dance and music. Likewise, the god Bes. The god Bes is represented as a dwarf It is also known as the dwarf god, and he appears as a dancer playing the drum. It was common that dancers had tattoos of this god, of the goddess, on their faces and legs, and also wore masks and costumes of him. Other important god related to dance and music was Ahi, also called Ihi or Ehi, who was Hathor's son. There are some references of this god, in the Book of the Dead, and his name, according to the sarcophagus tests, can mean the sistrum player or calf, because he was the son of the goddess Hathor, who was represented by a cow. Here in the slide, you can see an image of Hathor breastfeeding her son Ahi, the god of music, and the dwarf god called Des. Once again, the same slide in Spanish. Now let's check out these dancing scenes. Due to the way dancers were represented, as we see here, in murals inside the tombs or temples, in high or low reliefs, and illustrations drew and painted in papyrus, it is difficult to know how they move and the steps, how the movements and the steps really were, because the images are static. So we cannot for sure guarantee what kind of style they used to have when they perform the dance. We can analyze, because of the movements, that some of the dancing movements were associated with contortions or acrobatics, but we cannot really see the way they dance because we don't have like video records of that. So we just can see the static or the still images that were portrayed in the tombs. The same slide in Spanish. As I just mentioned you in the previous slide, dance was also connected with acrobatics. In the low reliefs found in temples, dancing was a fundamental part of the parades and harvest feasts. Along the empire, dance and music became important elements of the social and spiritual life of ancient Egyptians. They enjoyed acrobatics in dancing. Male dancers used to perform almost naked, and women wore tight dresses with transparencies, with their breasts exposed. So dancing was complemented with singing and music. Many musical instruments were played, like sistrum, the one that we see in the picture here on the slide, drums, tambourines, flutes, horns, lyres, and lutes. It is important to point out that the sistrum was the instrument, the musical instrument connected to the goddess Hathor. As you can see there, in the musical instrument, in the middle of it, we can find the face of the goddess Hathor. And once again, the slide in Spanish. If some of you are interested in receiving this slide presentation, this slideshow, you will feel free to write me an email that you will see my social media at the end and my email, and I will send you by email. Festivals and their connection with Ra. The institution of these ancient festivals was attributed to the sun god Ra. During the days when a festival took place, liturgy was majestic. The regular cult was interrupted during the festival, and special chants were sung in the festival. The temple was decorated and the city lighted up. The offerings were many because the amount of people gathered in the temple. They were placed on a sacred boat that the priests used to sail on. The parade took place in the patio of the temple. Nevertheless, during the months of great festivities, the divine statue was taken along the countryside and the river Nile. This was the time to ask questions to the gods who respond through oracles. Remember that people like to communicate with their gods. So the pharaoh was like a god upon this earth, but they used to go to the temples and to do offerings, and through oracles and priests, they believed they could communicate with their gods. And when they communicate directly to the pharaoh, they felt that they were communicating directly to their gods. It is important to keep in mind that people worship the gods on a daily basis. The priests communicated with the gods every single day. Now the same slide in Spanish. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the festivals. We're going to talk about the three most known festivals in ancient Egypt, which are Opet, that is the one that I'm going to talk in this moment, Hepset, and the Joyful Reunion. So let's start with Opet. Opet means abundance, prosperity, and is the main feature, and its main feature is the journey to the sanctuary. That is the main thing during this festival, the journey to the sanctuary. It was linked to the hierogamy ritual that took place in the presence of the royal harem. When we talk about the hierogamy, we're talking about the divine union, because it was the best moment for conceiving a royal child. The text mentioned the divine union of a god and the queen, so their heir will be born with the divine and the royal essence. I mean, we have royal nature and divine nature as well. In the New Kingdom, the festival lasted 11 days. In this occasion, the god Amun left his temple in Karnak to go to the Luxor temple where his wife Mut was. Then the pharaoh will take the statue of the god back to his original temple by sailing his sacred boat. In the image here, we can see the sacred boat of the god Amun in a low relief at the red chapel of the pharaoh Queen Hatshepsut. The festival, Opet, lasted 11 days during Thutmose III and 25 days during Ramses III. Now, facts about the Opet festival in Spanish. Let's continue with the second festival that was called the Hepset. This festival is carried out to renew the reign of the pharaoh, and it was repeated every 3 years. The ceremonial acts lasted several days, in which the king has to overcome different tests. So in this festival, the pharaoh, the king, was supposed to be challenged. So, for example, he had to do a ritual race, battles with animals, and also to do parades, check the census of the cattle, or hearings of the people troubles, because the pharaoh was in several times like a judge. So he had to have open hearings in his palace to listen to people troubles. The rites of the Hepset is called Set or Hepset festival, gave the pharaoh a full renewal of his life forces. That's why it was very important for the pharaohs, for the kings, this festival every 3 years, because they used to think that every 3 years you lose like the energy, the life forces that you need to be on your best to continue on your reign. So that's why pharaohs used to do it every 3 years. But for example, Ramses II, that was the pharaoh that ruled for the longest time in Egypt. He ruled for about 61 years. So he celebrated his first Hepset festival a year before his 30th reign anniversary. And then he used to repeat it frequently. Here on the images, we see on the upper part of the slide, the Hepset of Pharaoh Sesostris III. As we can see there, we can see the two crowns that represented Egypt before the empire was unified. So we have the crown of the upper Egypt and the lower Egypt. It means that the pharaoh is the pharaoh of the two lands, okay? Because the empire in that time was already unified. And the second image is the Hepset of Pharaoh Den. It was found in his tomb in Abydos, and it is on display at the British Museum. Now a little bit of Hepset in Spanish. I will let you 1 minute or two so you can, the Spanish audience, read as well. Okay, now we continue with the third festival that we have for today, that is the Joyful Reunion. The Joyful Reunion of God Horus and Goddess Hathor was about her, the goddess, leaving her home at Dendera to meet again with her divine husband Horus at Edfu. After 15 days of feasts, the statue of Goddess Hathor has to sail back to Dendera, and from the union of Hathor and Horus, the god of music is born. The one that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that was named Ihi. 3 divine unions take place along a year in ancient Egypt. The first divine union that took place was Amun and Mut's union. Then Isis and Osiris, and from Isis and Osiris, we have Horus, because Horus was born from that union. And last but not least, the joyful reunion of Hathor and Horus. Here we have in the image Horus and Hathor reunited in this amazing festival at Edfu Temple. Now the slide in Spanish as well. Okay, now let's talk just some tiny but important facts of dance in Egypt at the present time. The first thing that I want to make as a statement is that the dance that we know, for example, the dance that we have in this amazing MENAHT festival, belly dance, is not the dance that ancient Egyptians used to have. There are two completely types or kinds of dance that is important to have that in our minds. Because the dance that we know now, the classic Egyptian dance, is a dance that corresponds to the Arab Republic of Egypt, okay? So the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Egypt that we have in our present time, is not the same ancient Egypt of the land of the pharaohs. The Kemet land is different. So the Arab dance known as Raks Sharki or belly dance was named in that way by the French who colonized Arab countries. They realized that the belly and the hips were the parts of the body that stand out in the dance. So this type of dance is present in all Arab countries, and each one has developed their own specific style. In the Nile Valley, you will find the classic Egyptian dance. The closest, when people ask you, okay, so if dance now in the actual Egypt, in the nowadays Egypt, is different from the ancient Egypt dance, how can we connect the inhabitants of the Arab Republic of Egypt with the pharaohs? So the closest bloodline of the pharaohs that you could ever find in present time in Egypt are the Coptic Christians, who are a minority group of population in Egypt. Remember that the Coptic Egyptian is the latest stage of the Egyptian language. So this group is like the minority group that could be still related with the ancient Egyptians, like the descendants of the ancient Egyptians. One of the most well-known folk dances is the one with the cane called Saidi. That is very, very common. Now, remember that we are talking about dance in present time, Egypt in this time. So during the 20s, last century, 1920s, the classic Egyptian dance was influenced by the classic ballet. And we can see this mostly in the arms position and the movement on the stage. The most famous Egyptian singer from that time was Kulthum. She used to perform improvising her singing, her songs with her orchestra. Her music is frequently used in ballet dance. So remember the statement, the Egyptian dance of our time has no connection with the one in ancient times, okay? The same slide in Spanish. Okay, thank you. I hope you have enjoyed this journey with me along the ancient Egypt until we reach to the Arab Republic of Egypt. Here I show you my social media. You can find me on Instagram as @Elianubis, on Facebook as Egiptología en Medellín, or Twitter, the same, @Elianubis. Here is also my email and my website. Please, if you want to have this slide presentation, please send me an email and I'll gladly send it back to you. Okay? Have a great day and please keep on enjoying this amazing MENAHT festival. And thank you to Isabel Angel for this kind invitation.